Okay, this video is about Kathryn Reid. She's a biochemist, PhD, and she cured her daughter's autism. So this is her right here. She gave a great TED Talk. You can watch that. I'll put the link below to her TED Talk. Here she is standing in front of a slide of hers showing all the different names which can represent MSG or other related excitotoxins like aspartame and cysteine. They're excitatory amino acids that overstimulate glutamate or related receptors in your neurons to increase cytoplasmic calcium and overactivate the neuron. So what was interesting and unique about her situation is her daughter developed autism, and of course she was very sad about it, but she's a biochemist and she started reading about it and she realized that in some cases, it's related to excitotoxicity. So glutamate is the excitatory neurotransmitter of the brain. It's 90% of the neurotransmitters in the brain. It has an excitatory effect, meaning that it stimulates the postsynaptic neuron. So she decided to remove all the MSG from her child's diet. And she found that you couldn't just see MSG on a package. You'd have to look at all these substitutes and related things. And there's things that sound similar, like hydrolyzed vegetable protein, which contains a lot of cysteine, which is also an excitatory amino acid. Okay, glutamate is an amino acid. It's an excitatory amino acid, meaning that it's an amino acid that's also a neurotransmitter. Okay, and then she came up with interesting thoughts on the concept of manufactured free glutamate. So there's some proteins, I'll show you a slide of it in just a moment, like casein and gluten, and I think soy as well, that have very high amounts of glutamate. Average protein only has about 6% glutamate in it. And some of these proteins that have a lot more, when they get processed a lot, it all gets broken up. So now you got all this free glutamate floating around in your gut that can be rapidly absorbed and overwhelm the enteric cells, single layer of cells on your gut lining capacity to slow down that glutamate absorption into the blood, sort of safely package it away, if you will. Glutamate's also often added to soy milk. Soy sauce has got MSG in it, so does miso. Her website is called Unblind My Mind, where she goes into a lot more detail, has a blog and all the stuff about curing autism and other issues related to autism and MSG, for example. Okay, well, here is just a slide. We already saw this slide here. Let's go to the next one about all the different code names for MSG. Okay, here's what I thought was especially interesting about her lecture is that proteins like gluten, casein, normal proteins only got about 6% glutamate in it. These are amino acids. Like you can think of these string of pearls. The sort of maroon ones here are glutamate. And what she's saying is these proteins that have very high concentrations, amounts of glutamate in them, when you process them, like pasteurization for milk, homogenization, and all these other things you do to process food, she says you break these proteins apart, and this glutamate now will start being floating free in the processed food. And when you ingest it, you get this bolus of glutamate, which can overwhelm your gut's capacity to slow down glutamate. From a natural occurring food, the gut lining is, I read this article a long time ago, it's been a while since I read it, but the gut lining has the capacity to sort of package away the glutamate safely, so you're not floating around these high glutamate levels in your blood. But when you overwhelm the gut, you can get real high concentrations of glutamate in your blood, and those can potentially even overwhelm your blood-brain barrier and have increased access to your brain and be toxic. Okay, so this is the concept of, so MSG is monosodium glutamate, but this is MFG. So MFG means manufactured free. So the F is for free, manufactured free glutamate. And that's these glutamate individual amino acids floating around free in your gut that are separate from the rest of the protein. And like I said, these proteins like casein, gluten, and I don't know the exact percentage in soy, but soy and some other proteins have a lot of glutamate. So you get this high concentration of free glutamate in your gut, and that can rapidly, hit your intestinal absorptive surfaces as a bolus. And also one of the interesting things about it was, like I said, all these different code names for MSG. And in my opinion, you're not going to win the game buying processed food, because if there's more than one ingredient, there's a second ingredient. They can put MSG in the second ingredient and not tell you. So it's pretty much a reasonable assumption. If there's more than one ingredient, the second one probably has MSG in it. It's so common. It's a flavor. It's a flavor, and it tastes good. It's kind of similar to salt, and it gets people addicted to foods. Hyperpalatable, the so-called bliss point. A little bit of oil and grease and sugar and MSG, and the person just love it. They become addicted to it. But we're not programmed for these foods. They don't exist in nature. So anyways, I will put the link to her TED Talk there, and I'll put a link, if I can, to her. I don't know if I'll be allowed to link to her website, and you can check it out. So I saw the videos of her daughter, and they're also videos made by other people and stuff. And she's been interviewing a whole bunch of media outlets and all this stuff. And her daughter was autistic, and she got better. And she did it just with this MSG stuff. So there's different causes of autism, but in this case, things went well, so it's kind of interesting.